No charges will be filed in the Amir Locke shooting case. That's news today from Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison and Hennepin County Attorney Mike Freeman. Locke was shot and killed by police in February as they raided a downtown apartment. Locke was sleeping on the couch at that time when police say he woke up, grabbed a gun, and pointed it at them. That's when they say they shot him. Ellison and Freeman say there was insufficient admissible evidence. We want to take you to their press conference now.
Appreciation for the partnership with the Attorney General, himself and his staff. We have had very positive professional relationships in the successful prosecution of several police officers recently. That partnership is reflected in the decision we present today. Thank you, Keith, and your team.
Yes, sir.
The Hennepin County Attorney's Office, the Minnesota Attorney General's Office, and an independent expert, each separately and independently, have arrived at the conclusion that charges cannot be brought in this case. We will talk about that in response to your questions. Keith?
I want to thank you as well, Hennepin County Attorney Freeman. I want to thank your office. I'd like to thank the BCA, and I'd like to thank my colleagues. And this is the kind of work that we have to do. But I want to just note a few things. Amir Locke's life mattered. At 22 years old, he was only starting out. He had a job. He was making ends meet. He dreamed of being an entrepreneur. He was interested in real estate and branding his own business. He was about to move to Dallas to start a music career as his father had before him here in Minnesota. Amir came from a loving family. His mother, Karen, and his father, Andre, and many other family members and friends who loved him dearly. He had family in the military and in law enforcement, and he admired members of law enforcement. According to news reports, Amir's parents counseled him about how to handle interactions with the police. Keep your hands visible. Don't make any sudden movements. One thing Amir was not a suspect. Our investigation found no evidence that he had any role in the homicide investigation that brought the police to his door at 6:48 on February 2nd. Amir was a victim. He never should have been called a suspect. The role that County Attorney Freeman and I took on was to determine whether the current law permitted us to file criminal charges in Amir's death. And in so doing, we had to evaluate all the evidence to Minnesota's use of force statute, which is rooted on a 33-year-old Supreme Court precedent called Graham versus Connor. As we announced this morning, we have determined that under the precedent and the laws that we have, we cannot file criminal charges. Current law only allows us to evaluate the case from the perspective of a reasonable police officer. And that language is from the Fourth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution and relevant cases and statutes. We're not allowed to evaluate the case from the perspective of the victim. With all of the available evidence, we would not be able to prove in court that Officer Henneman's use of force was not authorized under the law beyond a reasonable doubt. It would be unethical for us to file charges in a case in which we know that we will not be able to prevail because the law does not support the charges. And still, and yet, a loving, promising young man is dead. His death leaves us with a wound in our community, but that is small in comparison to the wound that his family is suffering from. Communities have been torn apart by the trauma yet again, and the life of a police officer has been changed forever as well. If the law does not allow us to file criminal charges in this case, what can we do as policymakers, prosecutors, society, community, to keep a death like Amir's from happening again? First, we need to interrogate whether no-knock warrants are ever really needed. There are inherent risks for everyone involved, including civilians and officers. Cities like St. Paul and even some states have stopped using them, and it hasn't hurt public safety. Yesterday, Mayor Frey issued another no-knock policy, which appears stronger than the previous one. Now this policy needs to be actually enforced and obeyed. Then maybe Minneapolis can get the results like St. Paul, which hasn't used a no-knock warrant since 2016, with no harm to public safety. Second, Congress must pass the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. I don't mean someday, I mean now. We need state and local actions as well, including enacting the rest of the recommendations of the working group to deadly force encounters that Commissioner Harrington and I released more than 2 years ago with the inspiration and advice from County Attorney Freeman. Third, Minneapolis leaders need to talk about putting an end to in-custody deaths this way, but we need to get serious about doing it. The problems involving policing and communities of color in Minneapolis are long-standing and everyone knows it, yet it feels like nothing ever is done about it. Finally, as prosecutors, we need to continue to hold offenders accountable and uphold the law and uphold standards of justice. The fact is, as I've said before, we'll uphold the principle that no one is above the law and no one's beneath it either. And with that, I think we're prepared to, unless you want to make some more remarks.
Amen.
Thank you very much.